in YouTube and okay. All right, here we are. Hello. Thank you for being with us here tonight. I'm Tiffany Cates, author of M Theory, and today is the official publication day. Ooh, sorry, let me mute. All right. Oh wait, here we are. Can someone else mute their YouTube? Hello. Thank you for being with us here tonight. I'm Tiffany Cates, author of M Theory, and today is the official publication day. Ooh. Sorry, what do I need? Mute? All right. Oh wait, here we are. Can someone else mute their YouTube? Hello. Thank you for being with us here tonight. I'm Tiffany Cates, author of M Theory. And today, okay, shall I just move forward and see what happens? Okay, perfect. Here we are, celebrating the good old-fashioned COVID way with 3 of my favorite people in the whole world. So here is Beth Alvarado. Say hello, Beth.
Hello.
Hello. Beth is the author of 4 books and won the 2020 Oregon Book Award in Creative Nonfiction for her essay collection, Anxious Attachments. Her latest book, Jillian in the Borderlands, A Cycle of Rather Dark Tales, was published by Black Lawrence Press in October 2020. This is I am being totally messed up by that.
It's because we're being visited by our ghosts right now. It's a little
We're
bit
being
exciting.
haunted by ghosts.
Just like
Thanks a lot, Jillian. Okay.
Working some technical difficulties. I will just say that I don't have YouTube on at all, and it might just be yours, Tiffany, and we'll sort it out.
Ta-da!
I found the problem. Good gosh, I'm so sorry, everyone.
And how quickly? Brava!
How quickly? Oh, it's only been a minute.
See?
It isn't that bad. Okay. God bless. Okay, I'm going to start over again with Beth. Beth is the author of 4 books and won the 2020 Oregon Book Award in Creative Nonfiction for her essay collection, Anxious Attachments. Her latest book, Jillian in the Borderlands, A Cycle of Rather Dark Tales, was published by Black Lawrence Press in October 2020. This, just as the title states, is a cycle of rather dark tales. It focuses on Mexican-American, Euro-American, and Mexican characters and features visionary experiences alongside a young woman whose drawings begin to create realities instead of just reflecting them. Beth lived in Tucson, Arizona for most of her life before migrating here to Oregon's high desert. And I'm so glad she made the move. My life would not be the same without you, Beth. And I want to thank you. I'm so not going to cry. I want to thank you for being my cheerleader and my friend and my writing mom. And I love you. Next up, I have Irene Cooper. You say hello, Irene.
Hello, Tiffany.
So when I told my husband I was doing the introductions, he said, oh, well, if you're introducing Irene, all you have to do is say, if you were to look up badass in the dictionary, it would only say one thing, Irene. And it was hilarious, but it's also true. Irene is an active member of the writing community who facilitates writing workshops in educational settings, a regional prison, and throughout the Bend area. She is the co-editor of the State Project, and in 2020, she co-edited an anthology of regional writings titled Placed, an Encyclopedia of Central Oregon. Her writings appear in The Feminist Wire, Phoebe, Utterance, Denver Quarterly, The Manifestation, The Rumpus, Witness, and many more. And as if that's not enough, she put out 2 books in the last year. That's correct, right, Irene? 2 in a year? Yeah, Badass. Okay, now I lost my book. Committal is from Vegetarian Alcoholic Press. It is a speculative speculative sci-fi novel about family, the body, and the earth. Spare Change is a truly lovely collection of poems from Finishing Line Press. And maybe now you all understand why my husband said what he did. I could talk to Irene for hours upon hours, and it would never, ever, ever be enough. I want to thank you for sharing this day with me. I love you. I love you. Last, but definitely not least, is Bridget Lewis. Say hi, Bridget. Bridget is saved in my phone as the queen of everything, and I totally mean it. You're going to find traces of her perfection laced throughout her work. Her writing has appeared or is forthcoming in the Southampton Review, Diagram, a Lambda Literary Award-winning issue of Foglifter, and the Bellingham Review. Her chapbook, Origin Stories, reimagines biblical tales and was the winner of the Iron Horse 2020 chapbook competition. However, what's more important to Bridget is that you all know she lives near an Oregon river and can always smell a mixture of sage and juniper in the air. Bridget, my queen of everything, you're a beautiful soul. And I want to thank all three of you for doing this tonight. It really means a lot to me. And I love you all.
Well, it is our absolute pleasure. I can speak for all three of us to know that we are delighted to be here with you on your publication day. We just wish that we could be, physically with you on your publication day. But since we can't, this will have to do. And we are all going to raise a glass. We invite anyone who's watching live, or if you're watching later, even if it's 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, I encourage you to raise a glass to M Theory and to Tiffany. Do you have a copy of the book, the physical book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. I don't have
I
mine.
almost forgot.
Where is my book? All right.
Okay, so we're going to do some reading from the book in a little bit, but I threw out the idea to do a couple of questions from the Proust Questionnaire, and I know of this because sometimes I like to thumb through Vanity Fair, and it's always in the back. And I had to look up a little bit about its origin story, and so Proust, it was a parlor game, and Proust answered questions. He didn't invent it, so I'm not sure who to give credit to, but it was from his era, and he answered quite obliquely. I checked out some of his answers. Maybe I'll read you some. But I'm going to start with Beth. I'm going to ask you each 3 questions from this questionnaire. There's maybe, I think there is kind of, it sort of shifts. There's maybe some questions that are always on it, and then some that people like to add to it. So Beth, I'm going to start with you, and no need to, answer in depth. Just go with it. What is your idea of perfect happiness? That's all.
Right now, being at the beach and traveling is it shifts from day to day, but right now, that's where I would like to be.
I'd like to join
with you guys at the beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What is your most marked characteristic?
I'm always of 2 minds about everything.
That was so quick. I love that. And definitely one-minded on that. Okay, lastly, which talent would you most like to have?
Singing.
I knew you were going to say that. It just occurred to me. I've heard you say that before. Okay. Do you want to elaborate about any of them? You don't have to, but I just want to give you the opportunity. Do you want to describe that beach that we're all hanging out on? Because I want to be there too.
Last year. I'm thinking of the one Rockaway Beach in Northern Oregon. Oh, it was so beautiful.
Yeah, that is gorgeous. All right, Irene, on to you, Miss. First question. What is your idea of perfect happiness?
Oh my God, I was hoping we'd already done that one.
Nope.
I won't steal Beth's. My idea of perfect happiness. A hot loaf of bread.
I
On a
love
beach.
it. On a beach.
On a beach. Yes, on Rockaway Beach.
Irene, who is your favorite hero or heroine of fiction?
Ooh,
Or theroine? Patent that. I just made that up.
heroine. Write that down, somebody,
Okay.
because heroine is already. I'm already writing it somewhere else.
Okay, good.
Golly. I do like that. I do like the pastor from Gilead if I'm feeling sort of thoughtful. But I like kind of crazy characters too, and I'm trying to think what would top the list of that. I mean, that character is very sane and wise, but I think by and large, I like a little neurosis. So I'll circle back to that one when I
Love
have
it.
my list of top neurotics that I like to read about.
Please do. Lastly, what is your most treasured possession? I'm already going to edit this to what is a most treasured possession.
Treasured possession. Treasured possession. Well, it might be my screaming goat figurine.
Yes. I think you've chosen well. Okay, wonderful. Miss Tiffany,
Okay, just please don't ask me like the happiness question.
number 2. What living person do you most admire?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
What living person do you most admire?
Oh, maybe we should have gone with the happiness question.
Yeah, they aren't easy. But also, it's just what strikes you in this moment. As
Well,
Beth said, the beach sounds good right now, but who right now?
I really admire Irene,
Oh.
Word on the street is she's a badass.
right? Yeah.
Okay. What is your favorite journey? What is a favorite journey? I'm going to edit the Proust questionnaire to not be so singular.
Okay. A favorite. Oh, I like literal journey,
Whatever.
spiritual journey.
Sure.
I actually just took a road trip with my husband and my eldest son and his girlfriend in October. We drove to the Tetons, and that is definitely a favorite journey. Absolutely.
Those photographs out the windshield of whatever vehicle you were driving were fantastic.
Okay, I did have the perfect happiness question. I mean, clearly had it for everyone, but I'm going to rephrase it and see if you'll be inclined to answer it.
Okay.
Describe a moment of, that's not good editing. It's just as much pressure. Describe a moment of low-key bliss.
Oh, okay. Every night, this
Yeah.
is going to sound so corny, but every night when I crawl into bed with my husband.
Oh, that's incredible.
It's
That
my
doesn't
favorite,
sound corny. It sounds very
my
sweet.
favorite part of every day. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to ask you questions.
Okay.
Um,
Don't ask me the happiness one.
well, tough.
Okay.
What is your idea of perfect happiness?
I sent the questions to Tiffany to ask me, but I deliberately didn't think about them, which is very easy for me to do. But an idea of perfect happiness. I really require time by myself out in the wild. So a nice walk where I'm like really up close with lichen. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm quite obsessed with lichen. So, but just, yeah, like time spent in nature where I get to be up close with it.
Perfect. And I've been really looking forward to this question. What do you most value in your friends?
I think curiosity and openness and curiosity and trustworthiness.
Perfect. And if you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be?
Why would I ask myself that?
I was wondering why. You would
Yeah.
ask.
Well, because there's some other more difficult questions. These were the least difficult, I thought. Courage. I would take more risks. I would be more courageous.
Right.
Yeah. So these parlor games, they got deep pretty quickly. So thank you for playing these games with me.
You know what else it occurs to me in listening to these games is that it feels like we all also try really hard not to be the utter nerds that we are, because now that I rethink any of those questions, so much of it goes back to the writing desk.
Mhm.
Like I could answer all of it through the lens of sitting down to write.
Okay.
And those would be probably not, well, the bread was truthful, but on the beach. But I still think like those highs and those significant moments of adrenaline and happiness. I mean, a lot of that happens very quietly in front of a screen.
I think that is an excellent point.
And courage.
And courage, most definitely courage.
And even looking perspective, I'm thinking about my like and comment, but just like looking at things closely, sitting with something closely, observing and patience.
Oh yeah, the research rabbit hole,
Everything goes back to writing.
Yeah.
Well, are you three ready to, well, the three of us are reading passages from Tiffany's book to her. She doesn't know what passages we've selected. Shall we start?
Let's do it.
Okay. So I'm going first. I'll read this and then I will stop jabbering so much. You're just gonna have to look at my profile. I have it situated over here, and that's how it's gonna be. So I chose a passage from the very first pages of the book to sort of like really set the scene of what it's about. The morning the lady in the blue coat drifted from one who came and went to one who was considered and categorized, Donovan James wasn't just running little girl hitting daddy late, or even gutsy deaf man late, but the kind of late where absolutely nothing around him looked familiar, and therefore everything looked new and mildly alarming. It was his first day back after Christmas. He'd overslept, skipped his shower, spilled coffee on his pants on the way out the door, and by the time he was ascending to the platform, he could hear the thunder of the 7:31 train pulling in and then the ding-donging of the doors as they opened. To one unfamiliar with taking public transit, the art of it may be lost, but there is in fact an art. For Donovan, this involved the utility of door placement and the convenience of exiting. When exiting at Armitage, Monday through Friday, this meant riding the third to last train car and entering from the front door. On this morning, however, Donovan breached the top of the stairs just as the doors were closing and had to jump in before they could shut him out. Third to last train car, back door. His bag caught in the closing process, inspiring the spastic opening and closing of the doors, their accompanying ding-donging, and the pre-recorded voice that kept shouting, "Doors closing," though it was clear they were not. He was by no means the first person to cause such a scene, but frequency didn't dampen the humiliation of being caught in a stuttering situation. After 2 very long seconds and several convulsive attempts, he snatched his bag through the momentary opening and tried to ignore the train operator's din. "Do not attempt to board or alight this train while doors are closing," a phrase he had heard many times, just never directed so personally at him. Looking up, he tried to avoid noticing anyone who had noticed him, but the appearance of a continued flame drew his attention. The red and purple of the rising sun shining in through the window behind her had created the illusion of something dangerous, until his mind interpreted a speckle of white face glowing at its center. It was surrounded by a flame of hair, a mustard yellow stocking cap, and the robin's egg blue of her down coat. The lights flickered as the train lurched forward, and he couldn't help but determine it was her, zapping the electricity from the train as her pink lips suspended themselves with an upturned tenderness that said, "I've been there." A smile that informed him his insertion into the scene had not just been observed, but considered.
You make it sound so beautiful.
I was wondering if it would be fun to hear it in someone else's voice. It's a pleasure to read.
Thank you.
It is beautiful. Well, I am going to read from, I was going to read from the middle of the book, but then the part that I chose is about a third of the way through, and it's from the point of view of the detective Leslie Powell, who is one of my favorite characters. And this chapter, well, it's called Interference. I think all of his chapters are called Interference.
Yeah.
But this is early, so it's kind of, I think I chose it because it introduces us to this important character in a kind of deep way. 6 months after the boy died, Leslie woke to the sound of his phone vibrating rhythmically on his bedside table. The clock read 6:15. "This is Powell. Nice of you to answer." Masterson was more awake. "Something's come up and I won't be in today." Leslie rubbed his eyes in the dark and thought of Deb. Is everything okay? 7 months ago, he could still feel the warmth on her side of the bed when he woke, but that hadn't happened in a while. He was up later, she was leaving earlier. They rarely met one another in between. Masterson was smoking. Leslie could hear him inhaling through the line. "Everything's fine. I've just got stuff to take care of." He reached to turn on the light, thinking of the tasks he'd need to handle that day and hoping something would happen. Some bit of evidence would come through and he could release himself from the weight of the boy's death. He couldn't live with it hanging around his neck anymore. He needed a break to the case, proof that the time he'd invested had been worthwhile. But he also needed a distraction from what his life had fallen into, and Masterson knew both of these things. "They're sending Obachowski to meet the lady on St. Louis. Do me a favor and tag along, would you?" "Sure, what time?" The lady on St. Louis acted as popcorn filler, a case Masterson had asked for after a spate of summer homicides left them all needing something quieter. 9, and don't make it obvious, Powell. Leslie wasn't sure what he meant by the statement, but agreed. "Her file's on my desk." Masterson disengaged the line without further discussion, and the air conditioner kicked on. There would be at least one more homicide that day. There was a flicker of hope that when it happened, it might bypass their district and not add to their workload. But it was the boy's birthday, and regardless of where the bodies fell, the whole city should be held responsible. He couldn't move through the sequence of events that led him to this day at 6:17 in a dark and empty house without picturing the boy's body on the table and knowing that his death and the bubble of grief Leslie felt in relationship to it had pushed everything away but his own failures. The silence surrounding him was a new trend, a variance that began shortly after the boy's death and had since come to mean that no one wanted to be around him for fear they'd have to hear about it. A sourness arrived in his gut, his body feeling the memory just before his mind. The boy had died, Leslie had returned home, and Deb had poured him a cup of coffee. He wasn't yet aware that he didn't want to talk about his feelings or think about how she knew a child had died. He could feel a shift taking place within his world, a falling out and over that separated him from what he thought and what he could hold on to. The death of the boy had propelled him toward the reality of his dying marriage and left him with this single memory of Deb and coffee, the last time he'd felt a being with someone. Standing naked in the bathroom, waiting for the hot water to work its way up the pipes, Leslie observed himself in the mirror. His chest hair had turned gray and his pecs sagged enough for him to know it would only get worse with time. Deb, at least, the last time he'd seen her, had her nails done and was wearing a new shade of lipstick. He tested the water and thought about calling her. It felt like he'd woken up one morning to find his life completely different, but he knew that wasn't the case. before freshly painted nails, before Jamal's death, before breakfasts together stopped happening and secretly shared cigarettes took place, there had been smaller things. Things they'd done or failed to do and thought nothing of until one day their life no longer held the trajectory of being together. He wondered how long it would last, how long they would continue before this separate life existence became permanent in ways he couldn't take back or make better. The question rode along next to him on his way to work, like a hitchhiker pointing a loaded weapon at all his thoughts and opinions of what happened around him. His wedding band, thick and gold and scratched by 36 years of living, looked surprisingly foreign on his finger. Even his gray slacks, matching tie and white shirt, the same combination of clothes and colors he'd worn since making detective 17 years ago, felt disembodied. Sitting in the parking lot of the station, he stared at the dust that had collected across his dash and steering column, knowing it had gathered there one fleck at a time, one fleck of shedding skin, clothes fiber, and plant pollen at a time, and he'd done nothing to wipe their tiny corpses away. There comes a point when things cannot be undone. And as Leslie moved to escape the dysfunction of his surroundings, he considered what it would look like to sit there in a new truck, something unburdened by decay. I could do that, he said to himself, buy a new truck and start again.
Thank you, Beth.
I do like Leslie.
He's a great character.
He is a great character. I chose something toward the end. I mean, it is a thriller. Can't read the end. But we're back to Donovan at this point, our character that Bridget introduced us to. And it is a moment, however, toward the end when the complications are building. And the name of the chapter is Rules. And I'm going to see. I think I'm just going to have to pretend like I can see all because I'm going to read it from my computer. Okay, there we go. Rules. Donovan went for his first run in 6 weeks and returned home to find a note Lily had left lying on his desk. I woke up naked in your bed. Hope you'll help me remember. She'd placed the flash drive she'd given him on top, circled it with the green pen he used for grading, and then scrawled, "Open me." Crumpling the paper, he buried it in the kitchen trash under some Chinese takeout before digging it up and burning it in the kitchen sink. The flash drive itself was something less innocuous. At least that's what he told himself when he plugged it in and began opening its folders. There were 6 in total. Donovan opened all of them. You could keep it for when you're alone. He didn't allow his eyes to fall on the details, but he still felt the gluttonous devouring of one who has been starved too long. That's what you do, what you've always done. He ejected it, held it in his hand, contemplated its demise, but a text message pinged and the flash drive was buried under sticky pads and staples in the back of his desk drawer. The message read, "Meet me at Kincaid's, noon today." And he tossed the phone aside, didn't recognize the number, didn't think it was meant for him. People hide what they don't want others to find in the first place most people look. Is this where they look? No one's looking. He slammed the drawer shut and paced the space full of scattered sensations. While the whole affair was being washed from his sheets and skin, images of her limbs lingered. The flash drive left a ghost to haunt the less controlled portion of his being. His brother called 3 times while Donovan was in the shower. "We're coming in on Friday evening and leaving Tuesday morning. Jimmy got an extra day." The washer was on spin, and he laid his upper body across it, trying to shake free his mind. I hope your lady friend can handle us, and she better fucking like soccer, Dono, or I'm going to be pissed. Lily would willingly play his girlfriend, but the thought made him hate himself even more than he already did. She might be able to pass for 20-something physically, but mentally, she was a mess of teenage everything, and no one would ever buy it, not even Jay. Then there was Sarah. She wouldn't pretend to be anything ever, not with her clothes on anyway. So she was out, even if everyone could believe they were dating. Tinder was an option, and much cheaper than a prostitute, both of which he'd considered in order to appease his mother and quiet his father. She'd have to have red hair. They know she has red hair. Not just anyone can pretend to be Emily, not with the lights on. Shut up. They'll see your disappointment. The room smelled like burnt paper and evoked blue images. He sat at his computer, still in his towel, not opening the drawer, but trying to determine what to do with his physical need for release. He considered recording himself. Who for? Who will you show it to? He reached for his phone and it vibrated in his hand, an unknown number calling to remind him of an unknown message sender. He silenced it, sent it to voicemail, restarted his phone, and found that the caller hadn't left a message. The unease he felt over the mystery number was the catalyst for the next email he sent. Dear Lily, nothing happened. You put yourself in a dangerous position last night and that could have ended tragically. Please have more care in the future. Sincerely, Mr. James. He stared at the message sent across the top of his screen and waited for his despondency to either abate or push him over the edge.
Thank you so much for that. That was really great. Thank you.
That's your book.
It's my book. I can't believe it. It sounds great when you all are reading it.
It is great.
I feel a little bit, I'm leaking just a little tiny bit, so forgive me. Okay.
So, when we were kind of talking about talking, one of the things we thought about that I think all of us have encountered in trying to take a book from manuscript on your laptop to thing that other people read, whom you may not even know, is this question of genre and identity and how you talk about this work in ways that does it justice, but also creates a path for a reader to recognize something. I have, I can't bring it up because I don't think I can screen share, but when I was talking about marketing my first novel, Committal, and as by your description, it's almost comically long, speculative, spy-fi, family saga thrill. I mean, just like a German noun, just keep adding on. But this idea of genre, and there's even I have a 5-year-old graphic that I'm going to look at on my own screen that talks about excluding purely literary works. And we'd all, I think, with our MFAs tucked neatly under our arm, want to think we're writing literary work, and we are. But there is this idea of mystery and thriller and romance, and then the subcategories of techno thriller, police procedural, noir, which is a lovely word that's terrific to attach to this book as well, psychological thriller, legal thriller, all of these things. So, Tiffany, how do you talk about this book?
Well, it was really difficult in the beginning because everyone thought it was a murder mystery. And I had to just keep saying, it's not a murder mystery. But at the same time, I also had to make it not a murder mystery, right? So that the way that it stands as literary noir right now seems absolutely the most fitting, I think.
Dig into that a little bit. What are elements that nod to the noir, and what are elements that denote the literary?
Well, I mean, classic definition, I believe, of a literary novel is, it has to be over a certain word count, And it can't be happy.
Oh, how Russian.
I know, right? So yeah, I think that in and of itself makes M theory literary. It was a word I wasn't very comfortable with in the beginning, because when I think of literary, I do think like Dostoevsky and, you know, Tolstoy and people who write these beautiful, long, epic novels. And I wasn't writing that, you know. I take that back. I was absolutely writing a beautiful novel. But I think just having the definition, like simple terms, word count, not a happy ending. If it had a happy ending, then we could just list it as commercial, right? It would just be commercial noir. And the noir is definitely Leslie, you know, the downtrodden detective. The whole world is against him. He's out there on his own. You know, it sounds cheesy when I put it like that, but Leslie really is lovely.
What about y'all? When you talk about your books, what words do you use?
Well, I just want to say, for me, literary means, you know, attention. In fiction means that character is at the center.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, and the character really matters a lot, and motivations. I mean, that doesn't mean they have to be realistic, but character is at the center for me of a literary novel. And then also the language, you know, the attention to language, doing something new with language. So genre fiction for me for a long time was fiction that just didn't pay attention to language very much and paid much more attention to plot than to character. But I think that that's changing, and that people are really, there's some, you know, a lot more books that are crossovers, and a lot more people that are really interested in writing, that are also interested in writing books that fit into some genre, like noir. You know, there's something attractive about being able to do both. So, you know, and not having the categories be so rigid. I think of the categories as a lot as marketing.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, and that's how they began, I think, more than anything else. So, but as a writer, there's something to use and to push against, right?
Yeah, I like that idea of resisting and utilizing at the same time.
I sort of, when you were, you know, first posed the idea of what is literary, I thought I should know that from my MFA program, and why don't I? But also, the first thing that came to my mind is the language, like more a different attention to language, and I think it often gets sort of said that it's, you know, like a higher, like, I mean, it has historically been considered like a higher kind of language, and I also think that is ridiculous and silly, and changing, and yeah, I don't really have anything to add, except that I sort of concur with what Beth said.
Well, and I want to make a comment, you know, for the democratization of the appreciation of wonderful language, which I think readers respond to wonderful language, and I think that you know, it's a very antiquated statement to think that they don't. And some of the glowing reviews I have read of M theory already use these words, and they're not professional critics. They're people saying elegant prose, sophisticated language, a joy to read. You know, all of these, you know, from the heart responses to a good story as well. So, bravo again.
M theory is not just achieving a literary quality because of word count.
Although we are a chatty bunch. Yeah.
That's
And when you asked, how we each kind of describe our works, I know that I've had this conversation with Irene and Beth before. I'm curious if you relate to this too, Tiffany. But we're kind of talking about hybrid works here and like crossing genres. But I think that us three have also like described our work at any given point in time as like, oh, it's weird. Like, I don't know how to describe it. I write weird things.
And yet there is a weird fiction category, which is highly specific.
Yeah.
What is it, Irene? Do you remember?
Well, I know I should take notes for myself to say, like, who are the proponents of weird fiction? You know what? Talk amongst yourselves. I'm actually going to look it up because
I'm not familiar with this.
Well, you should be actually, because
I write weird things.
You flirt with this all the time, I think.
But Tiffany, is that statement relatable at all? I mean, is this just what it means to be a writer in general, to think that what you're writing is a little weird?
I think that if this were our thesis defense and I said yes, I would be in big trouble, is what I think. But thank God that's over. And yes, I think trapping yourself into a category, sitting down and saying, oh, I'm going to write speculative fiction now. It's just, I mean, I couldn't do that. I wouldn't know where to begin. I just write a story, right? And then when people say, what do you write? I can just say fiction. And then they say, what kind of fiction? And then it gets a little bit more tricky.
Right.
Yeah.
But
fiction is a big umbrella. So it's nice to just stick to a big umbrella at times.
Yeah.
So one of the names that I was thinking about when I was talking about weird fiction, Kelly Link is associated with it, and Karen Russell. But they use the word speculative in this genre a lot too, and sort of taking, mythology and monsters and all of these things, and reinventing these stories with these elements that, of course, is, high and low art at the same time, right? I mean, it's fun, and also a thinking exercise too, to have that level of imagination, and to tell sometimes these stories that feel like in science fiction, they feel so natural. They feel as though you could just walk into them, and yet all of these, wild things are happening, or there are wild elements in a wild world. And this freedom to do that. And I think I was feeling this in M theory, but Bridget, in your work as well, the idea that it feels, your environment, I would love you to speak to this from Origin Stories, feels so natural, and yet can only be imaginative.
What do you mean by environment? Like the physical environment of the pieces, or?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit like, any aspect of it, whether it's the modern setting to a biblical tale, or any door you want to open into what's different, what's weird.
Well, this is making me think about genre and like fairy tales specifically, and how I just wrote down genre and container. And I think that is kind of what we're getting at here, which is that the beauty of any type of genre, and we should circle back to M theory on this, because genre implies that people are going to get X, Y, and Z, whatever X, Y, and Z is for that particular genre. So like for fairy tales, which instantly came to mind, there's like a flatness, there's some abstraction, weird things are happening, but there's this sort of like flat delivery. And so there's these things that go along with particular genres, maybe they're tropes, and then that's kind of the platter that's delivered to the reader. And then you can just put all this weird stuff in there. So I guess in Origin Stories, I'm taking, I've had some people say, do I need to like study before I read this? Like, because they are reimagining biblical tales, right? And so they're wondering if they should brush up on the story of Adam and Eve, or David and Bathsheba. And I think, no, I mean, if you know the stories, there might be an interesting layer there for you. But the idea is that these stories are in the world that we live in, and what can you, like, what surprises have I hopefully put in the tales that, pop out at you based on the container of these tales and myths and stories that are sort of the container for what you might not even if you don't know the content, the container is there.
I love this idea of the container, and I'm going to think of both Beth's book and Jillian in the Borderlands and M Theory, because you both jump points of view, and I think that is is that me or is that y'all frozen? I think it might be me, but if you can speak to all, because that in itself is a container, right? Coming from a different interior space, the unique perspective of one character or one individual, when we're inside Jillian's head or Leslie's head or Donovan's head.
Beth, I would like you to go.
Okay, because I'm still thinking about something that Bridget said, and about, I think that the thing that when we read Bridget's stories, we're seeing something new, and surprising. And so that's why we keep reading. It's like we may know those biblical stories, we may not, but she makes something new out of them. And to me, that's what really good writing does, almost no matter what genre it is. It surprises us and it helps us see something in a new way. And so, I hope that Jillian did that. And one way for me of doing that, especially since it's a book about the borderlands, is to have these shifting perspectives, because there isn't just one way of seeing anything, or just, there are all these different perspectives. So I don't know if that was why, I kind of wanted to decenter the narrative and not have a narrator that knew everything. I wanted to kind of discover the narrative along with the characters. And I don't know, but Irene, you have shifting points of view in your novel too, is it an omniscient narrator, but different chapters focus on different characters?
Yeah, only sometimes is it an omniscient narrator. Yeah, no, it jumps. Definitely, I took advantage of being able to jump inside another head whenever I felt the urge. Yeah.
Okay, I wondered why you didn't include your book in that. But yeah, so what is gained by that? I think it's very contemporary to have this shifting perspectives and not to believe in omniscience. That's the way that I feel about it. Like, I don't really believe in omniscience. So what I have to do is put all these different perspectives together, and it gives the reader a kind of omniscience. The reader then can figure out how everything fits together. And that's kind of the definition of suspense, is that.
Yeah, I think particularly in M Theory, the ground is always shifting. You're on a subway train all the time on a platform that is in high winds. You're not exactly sure what to think. And I think that's, but in that way, I'm trusting the experience when I'm in it, but I'm also sort of in this sort of delightful unknowing, because I'm getting the story told from different perspectives, and, where to settle is up to me.
Yeah, I actually chose the different perspectives because, we can never know everything, and as the storylines are coming together, the reader will know more about Emily, say, than Donovan knows about Emily. And so it's the layers of what is actually taking place around us all the time. I just wanted it to mirror, like, what is actually happening. We have no idea what is happening in the life of our neighbor, even if we see and talk to them every single day, or the person who sits next to us in the office. You have like a very surface level understanding. And I really wanted to take advantage of the shifting points of view to show how these small interactions can be blown way out of proportion and can mean significantly more to one person than they do to someone else. But then it shifts, it shifts the trajectory of the person who it's acting upon, whether it's the intention of the person or not. And that's, I don't know if any of that makes sense to you.
But it does. And I would love to just chime in and maybe ask a follow-up question, or maybe make a comment that you can construe into a question. I'm not sure how eloquent I can make it, but when Beth was reading her passage, it just struck me again. It's been a little bit since, I've revisited your book, and how Leslie and Deb are just, everyone just seems like they're trying to get on metaphorical trains and missing each other, and like they're late to something, they're trying to connect, they can't connect. And what you're describing is this very true to life experience, except as the reader we get to have more insight and have some tidiness of being able to put the pieces together, though just enough. I don't know if you can or want to speak to that, but just the process of crafting that just enough narrative for the reader. So, because I think as a reader, like I relate to that like sense of missed connections, or this, like there's a zillion tiny butterfly effects going on in your book, right? So
Yeah.
Was that enough to maybe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
I really wanted the reader to be a participant in the novel. They are a witness, as well as every other person within the novel. The reader itself is a witness of what is happening, and all they can do is form their own opinion, right? Just like everyone else in the novel. I didn't want to tell the reader if Donovan is a creep or not, right? I want the reader to find that out. I don't want to tell the reader if more about Emily than they need to be. I wanted the reader to just be able to form their own opinions about everything. And your opinion could be very different from Irene's opinion or Beth's opinion, because that's real life, right? And then there could be discussion. It was really important to me that at the end, people would want to talk about what had just happened, as if they were an actual witness to all that just transpired, and not just like,
That book's over.
That was fun. Yeah.
Well, it's very modern, don't you think?
Mhm.
To have that feeling of interaction in that way. I think that that's very, very contemporary.
I don't actually know.
I don't either, though I very adamantly nodded a moment ago. But what I was thinking is that I think there's probably been a strong, lineage of writers who just want to tell you what to think.
Oh yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. I don't want to do that.
Nice to create questions.
Okay, Beth, I really did want you to address the genre issue with Jillian and the Borderlands.
Oh, well, I didn't think so much about genre until that whole book began as an experiment. And in some ways it was an experiment all the way through it. Like I didn't know where it was going until it went there. So, but I knew it was fabulous because I didn't want to put, I didn't want it to have to be realistic, because I was writing nonfiction at the same time. And I got a little bit tired of real life. And so I allowed it to be fabulous. And then once it came out, it got more. So it started with, in 2010, I started writing it during the passage of SB 10, this law in Arizona that's called Show Me Your Papers law. And then by the end of the time that the book was written, they were separating families at the border. So the book got more and more political as it went, but it also got more and more magical. And it's really interesting to me that, some critics have said, well, it's like a social protest novel with magical realism, as if those two things are really separate genres, when in some ways they're the same. Magical realism comes out of social disturbance. And so it was interesting to me to think, well, as the book got more political, it also got more magical. And it just, kind of made sense to me that that happened. But anyway, so that's the kind of divide there, that this book is in between those two genres, or maybe it's not in between. Maybe it's actually, that's what it's supposed to be. I don't know.
In Bend, the library has a series of events in which authors come to town and fill the high school auditorium and talk. And this year it was on Zoom. And Ta-Nehisi Coates did this fantastic conversation a couple of weeks ago. And he talked about many things, and he's he's an extremely thoughtful and eloquent man. But they were talking about The Water Dancer, his book, which, when I read it, was surprising to me, in that there is an element of magic and of the supernatural, but it's not like it's consistently threaded through. It's here and there, and he doesn't talk about that in terms of defending it or explaining it, which I love. It's just part of this story and this narrative.
Beth, if you were to say that your book was a genre, what would you say?
I guess fabulous. I don't know. It's not really, it's a story cycle. It's in stories. It's not a novel. And fabulous in that things that, kind of like Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, right? Where there are these kind of magic, I don't know if it's spiritual or magical, but there's this other reality that exists as part of this reality.
Plus, fabulous sounds a lot like fabulous.
Yeah, it's fabulous. But Irene, what about your book? Because your book has those fabulous elements too. Or would you say more?
Yeah. No, I would say, it draws from committal, is in large part a book of references. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is very important to that narrative. A sort of retelling of that, although that itself is already magical, but but other elements as well, in sort of near future possibility of speculative nature of what technology can be doing, although quite frankly, the technology in the book is probably not current with current technology. It just sounds super fancy. But the idea that strange things are happening in this recognizable environment, I think, it is the idea that, we can feel when we go to the grocery store as well, but we're not paying, that much attention to the Hitchcockian crow on the telephone line, or the 30,000 Hitchcockian crows on the telephone line, whatever that is. What's the difference between one crow and 300 crows? It's a difference between, something we can walk right by, or something that's surprising and alerting. And I think this idea is of what we suddenly become alert to, or what characters in books decide not to be alert to. That's the fun of in part of this is the sort of imposed realism in a magical situation is part of the fun of writing it, right? Like the lack of surprise. But I think in committal, I take liberties with the idea of artificial intelligence, which I'm sure people who work in artificial intelligence would not say is taking liberties. It's just the future. But the sentience, the true sentience of objects in our world, of things like a GPS system, or of being able to create a futuristic reality in which you can write a program that can predict what somebody who has already passed away is going to say and react to in a given situation. This idea of rewriting what we know. and opening the door to other possibilities. Jillian draws, she's prophetic, in a way, or does she cause it? We don't know. And that's the fun part. And, Lilith and Eve can be sitting around having a margarita in the backyard, talking about a shared husband. So many questions that don't need to be asked. That's the fun part.
They don't.
And then, we're talking about magic, but I think, when you have a story like M Theory that is coming from these different perspectives and also has so much interiority, that in itself to me is sort of a magical element, because you can't ever be on the inside of somebody else's head, right? No matter how articulate they are or expressive.
We are officially coming up. We are at an hour now.
All right,
Wow.
5 hours more.
Yeah. So I think we should probably call this one good. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then we're going to be meeting each other on Friday at Grassroots Books. Well, virtually. At Grassroots Books.
Virtually.
And we'll be able to hear readings from Bridget's book and Beth's book and Irene's book, and it will and my book. I will not read a segment that was read tonight. Though Beth did pick one that I was considering. So there you go. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Tiffany.
and congratulations again.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful, beautiful book.
Thank you. And I couldn't be happier than to share this evening with you three. So love you.